Okay, with this layer, we'll be finishing the painting. We're going to paint in the background. But first, we're going to diffuse the line between colors 1 and 2. So we go in with the diluted mixture, and we're painting a line with color number 2 that overlaps into color number 1. Now you're painting wet paint over dry paint, but the paint is really diluted at this point. And we dilute the paint with water. So I go over and make sure I painted in the line completely. So now I go back in and I load my brush with color number 1. We first painted in color number 2. I'm now loading my brush up with color number 1. Right where color number 2 meets color number 1 is where I'm painting. I'm not really trying to blend it. I'm just trying to make the line look a little bit diffused. It'll give the illusion of the colors actually blending, but they're not really blended. So now I go in and try to correct any little mistakes that I see. And I go back and do a second pass with color number 1. Now I'm painting right where the color meets. I overlapped color number 2 into color number 1. Now the edge of where number 2 ends is where I go over with color number 1. There should be some color from number 2 that spills over into color number 1. That's what creates the diffused edge. Now I'm starting to paint in the background. I load up the flat brush, the 3/4 brush, with color number 1, and I paint in right next to the lightest color. This creates contrast. And this contrast will create the illusion of depth. We know that darker colors seem to shoot back and lighter colors seem to jump out at you. So when you put a dark color next to a really light color, it makes it seem like that very light color is coming towards you and that very dark color is going away from you, creating the illusion of depth. What we're trying to do is create a two-dimensional illusion. So I very carefully paint in color number 5. Like I said before, it's really easy to lose the round shape. And I'm painting with the toe, mostly. I wipe off the brush at this point, and I'm beginning to load color number 2. And we're going in and we're using some crisscross strokes, and we're kind of blending the colors together. And I'm gonna go in and paint really close to our sphere. creating contrast in color and contrast in how we're using the paint. The sphere is painted in really smooth. I want the background to be really shadowy. And by shadowy, I mean I don't want you to be able to pick out any kind of shapes, as if you were in a dark room, you know, and you can't really make anything out. All right, I use crisscross brush strokes to paint in the background. As you can see, I tried to blend in that dark color number 1 with color number 2, but not too much. And now we're going with color number 3, and we're just going to fill in the background with color number 3 with some crisscross brush strokes. We're being very careful to paint in close to the sphere. We want to keep that shape, and you try to paint with the toe and the belly as much as possible. As we stated earlier, most of the paint is in the belly. We take our time and we go across the side of the sphere trying to get that shape right. It takes a lot more time to paint with the toe than it does with the belly. You're painting in the background with the belly, it goes really fast. But when you start painting with the toe, you generally have to take your time. So in general, we're painting from dark to light. Now I add some light paint in that corner to I'm giving the illusion that there's light coming from that corner because of where the light lands on the sphere. So we're going in with color number 4. And we carefully paint in the sphere. And we do the same on the right side. We carefully paint in the sphere and by the shadow. And we maneuver the brush the best way we know how. Like whatever you have to do to get a corner, you're going to have to do. If you have to shuffle the painting around, then do so. So I go in and try to blend the colors in just a little bit more. Not too much though. By handling the background different from the foreground It calls attention to the foreground. I go in and I paint in color number 5 with the side of the brush. And I keep it close to our very dark color number 1. I do the same on the right side. Now I paint in the background using crisscross brush strokes. And finally, I'm loading the brush with the titanium white mixture that I used at the top of the sphere. And I'm going to use the lightest color near the darkest color, creating more contrast. Now I could have made it look like a diffuse shadow by adding a darker color. But I wanted it to stand out. Now I go in and do the same on the left side. Very, very carefully I paint it in. While painting in this background, I just try to use up all the extra paint I had on my palette. All right, and we are finished. So this is one of the more difficult lessons for students in the beginning. You really don't have to master it. What I'm really shooting for is that you have a basic understanding of it. But if you can understand it now, you'll be able to do it better later. Peace.